Motivation feels powerful in the moment, but it quietly keeps you dependent on emotional highs instead of structural strength. You've been trained to wait until you feel inspired before beginning important work, and that waiting has cost you more time than you realize. Every time you say, "I'll start when I feel ready," you unknowingly delay the version of yourself that could already exist. Motivation is emotional energy, and emotional energy rises and falls like unstable weather that cannot be scheduled. You are not inconsistent because you lack ambition. You are inconsistent because your system depends on something unstable. The uncomfortable truth is that motivation rewards anticipation, but discipline rewards repetition. Anticipation feels exciting because it promises change without demanding immediate structure. Discipline, however, removes negotiation from your behavior and replaces it with predictable action. When action becomes scheduled instead of emotional, consistency stops being a personality trait and becomes a mechanical outcome. You have been trying to fix inconsistency by increasing inspiration instead of redesigning your behavioral architecture. That is why motivation feels like progress even when nothing sustainable is being built. You confuse intensity with reliability, but intensity is loud and reliability is quiet. Loud energy convinces you that change is happening, even when your habits remain exactly the same. Habits do not care about how motivated you feel. They respond only to repetition under stable conditions. If your system collapses whenever your mood shifts, then your foundation was emotional, not structural. Stay with me, because the next shift will challenge how you define productivity itself. Productivity is not the ability to perform when excited. It is the ability to execute when indifferent. The disciplined version of you does not wake up inspired. It wakes up committed. Commitment is heavier than motivation, but it builds weight-bearing structure in your identity. When you rely on motivation, you constantly restart. When you rely on structure, you continue. Every restart feels dramatic because it begins with a surge of renewed intention, but it quietly reinforces the habit of stopping whenever momentum fades. The pattern becomes predictable: excitement, action, fatigue, avoidance, guilt, and then another promise to begin again. This emotional roller coaster convinces you that effort is happening, yet measurable progress remains inconsistent. You interpret the fluctuation as personal weakness instead of recognizing it as a structural design flaw. Motivation seduces you with intensity because intensity feels like movement, even when direction is missing. Direction does not come from how strongly you feel. It comes from what you repeatedly choose regardless of feeling. When behavior is tied to mood, productivity becomes fragile and unpredictable under ordinary stress. A stressful week, a poor night of sleep, or a minor disappointment can dismantle a motivation-based system entirely. Discipline-based systems, however, are intentionally boring, repetitive, and almost mechanical in execution. Boring repetition may lack emotional thrill, but it builds psychological stability that does not fluctuate with circumstance. Stability is what allows effort to compound instead of constantly resetting back to zero. If you want long-term change, you must trade emotional spikes for structural consistency. This trade feels uncomfortable because it removes the dramatic narrative of transformation you have grown attached to. But dramatic narratives do not create durable identity. Daily structure does. Identity is not formed by rare bursts of excellence. It is shaped by ordinary actions, repeated quietly. The disciplined individual does not feel extraordinary most days. They feel consistent most days. And consistency, though unimpressive in the short term, compounds into extraordinary results over time. You are not lacking potential. You are lacking protective structure around your effort. Effort without structure evaporates, but effort protected by routine endures long enough to grow. The shift you must make is simple but demanding. Act first, feel later. Acting first interrupts the emotional negotiation that usually convinces you to delay meaningful work. When you remove the question of whether you feel ready, you eliminate the space where procrastination grows. The most practical way to break motivation dependence is to schedule behavior so precisely that mood becomes irrelevant. Choose a specific time, a specific action, and a specific duration that does not require emotional buildup. Start smaller than your pride prefers, because pride secretly fuels unrealistic motivational cycles. A modest, repeatable action executed daily builds more discipline than an ambitious burst performed once. Your micro-win today is simple. Complete one predetermined action at the same time tomorrow, regardless of emotion. Do not measure the intensity of your effort. Measure the reliability of your repetition. Reliability is quiet, almost invisible, yet it forms the backbone of disciplined identity. When you consistently act without waiting for inspiration, you slowly detach productivity from emotional volatility. Emotional volatility will always exist, but it no longer controls whether work gets done. The disciplined life is not rigid. It is resilient because it does not collapse under temporary feelings. Resilience comes from reducing dependency on mood and increasing dependency on structure. Once you understand this, motivation stops being your leader and becomes a welcome bonus instead. Motivation is useful when it appears, but discipline must function when it does not. You do not need to eliminate emotion. You need to stop outsourcing responsibility to it. Responsibility is not heavy when supported by routine. It becomes automatic under repetition. The version of you that acts without negotiation feels calmer, not louder. Calm execution may not feel heroic, but it builds a life that does not require constant restarting. If you are building yourself deliberately, then discipline must replace motivation as your primary operating system. And when discipline becomes your system, motivation transforms from necessity into occasional reinforcement. Motivation is not your enemy, but it is a terrible foundation for the life you want to build. Build structure first, and let emotion follow rather than lead. The moment you stop waiting to feel ready is the moment your real progress finally begins.